You know what's fascinating? People think avoidants don't care, that they're cold, disconnected, unreachable. But here's the truth. Avoidants do care. They just care differently. They've learned that intimacy feels dangerous, so they keep the door half open, never fully closed, never fully open. They keep in touch with multiple partners not because they're playing games, but because deep down, they're terrified of being consumed by one person. So what do? They spread that energy around. A quick text here, a like on social media there, a short call out of nowhere. It's not about passion, it's about control. It's their way of saying, I'll stay connected, but only on my terms. And here's the key lesson. This behavior isn't about weakness. It's about survival. They've been wired to believe that closeness equals danger, so they create a web of connections instead of leaning into one. But here's the beautiful part. When avoidants realize this pattern, when they face it, when they say, I will no longer let fear dictate my relationships, that's when transformation begins. Avoidants operate from fear of vulnerability, not lack of love. This truth is often misunderstood because on the surface, their behavior can look cold, detached, or uninterested. But when you peel back the layers, what you actually see is a human being who deeply desires love and connection, yet feels unsafe in it. They are not running away because they don't care. They are running away because they care too much, and the possibility of rejection, abandonment, or being consumed by someone feels unbearable. Their distance is not an absence of feeling. It is a defense against feeling too much. Think about it like this. If someone grows up in an environment where closeness often led to pain, whether through criticism, neglect, or inconsistency, they begin to associate intimacy with danger. As adults, they carry this belief into relationships. Vulnerability, which is the gateway to love, becomes a threat in their minds. To protect themselves, they create strategies to limit exposure. They might keep conversations surface level, avoid making future commitments, or withdraw the moment they feel pressured. To the outside world, it looks like they don't want connection, but the truth is they crave it so much that the fear of losing it becomes paralyzing. Operating from fear of vulnerability means they often build walls instead of bridges. They want to connect, but only in ways they can control. Small texts, late night calls, or maintaining multiple casual ties rather than one deep bond. This isn't because they lack the ability to love. It's because they've taught themselves that if they never put all their energy into one connection, they will never face the devastating pain of losing it. Their actions are not about indifference, but about survival. The tragedy is that many partners of avoidance misinterpret this. They see distance as rejection, when in fact it is a coping mechanism. They see silence as disinterest, when it is often fear. They see hesitation as a lack of love, when it's really a lack of safety. The avoidant isn't saying, I don't want you. They are saying, I don't know if I can handle what happens if I give you all of me. Understanding this changes everything. When we recognize that avoidants are not cold-hearted but self-protective, we stop labeling them as incapable of love. Instead, we see the inner conflict, the push and pull between desire and fear, closeness and distance, love and self-protection. They are not broken. They are simply wired by past experiences to protect themselves at all costs. The beauty is that this wiring can change. When avoidants become aware of the root cause, fear of vulnerability, they can begin to challenge it. They can start by asking themselves, what if letting someone in doesn't destroy me? What if it strengthens me? With patience, therapy, and conscious effort, they can learn that vulnerability is not weakness but strength. It takes far more courage to be open than to shut down. It takes more power to lean into intimacy than to run from it. So when we say avoidants operate from fear of vulnerability, it's not a judgment. It's an invitation to compassion. It's a call to see behind the mask of distance and recognize the heart that still longs to love but has been taught to fear it. And when that heart finally learns to trust, to risk, and to surrender to genuine connection, the love that emerges is not ordinary, it is extraordinary, because it comes from someone who has fought through fear, conquered self-protection, and chosen courage over safety, and that kind of love is unshakable. They maintain multiple low-level connections to protect themselves emotionally. At first glance, this may look like disloyalty, confusion, or even manipulation, but in reality, it's a survival strategy rooted in fear. For the avoidant, one deep connection can feel overwhelming. It demands vulnerability, honesty, and exposure of the parts of themselves they've been hiding for years. To keep that fear at bay, they spread their emotional energy across multiple people. A text message here, a social media interaction there, a casual check-in with someone they haven't spoken to in months. These small threads form a web of connections that make them feel safe. Because if one thread breaks, if one person walked away, the whole web doesn't collapse. They still have others. It's not about love being shallow, it's about safety being preserved. This way of connecting gives them the illusion of closeness without the risk of full vulnerability. When someone gets too close, they can retreat into another connection that feels less demanding. When one person starts to expect commitment, they balance the weight by leaning on another who expects less. They're not consciously trying to hurt anyone. They're unconsciously protecting themselves from the pain of dependence and loss. If all their emotional investment goes into one person and that person leaves, it feels like their whole world will crumble. But if they have 5 lighter ties instead of one heavy bond, the pain of loss gets diluted. To them, this is safety. To outsiders, it may look like inconsistency or a lack of seriousness. Pattern also gives them control. By choosing who to respond to and when, they regulate how much intimacy they allow into their lives. A casual "Hey, how are you?" to someone they haven't spoken with in months might seem meaningless, but for the avoidant, it's a reminder that they still have a backup source of attention and connection without having to give much of themselves in return. This low-level engagement allows them to feel connected without the weight of responsibility. It's not that they don't value people, it's that they value safety more than closeness. Understanding this helps break the misconception that avoidants are careless. They are not careless. They are careful, cautious, and hyper, aware of what could go wrong if they let down their walls too much. Their multiple connections are not about greed, but about fear. They are constantly managing the balance between wanting intimacy and protecting their independence. The truth is, many avoidants long for the same deep, consistent love everyone else does. They just struggle to believe that one person can be safe enough to hold their whole heart. The opportunity for growth comes when avoidants begin to see this pattern for what it is, a strategy that might keep them safe in the short term but robs them of depth in the long term. By staying spread out, they avoid the possibility of pain but also the possibility of true fulfillment. When they finally learn to risk putting more of themselves into one relationship, to test vulnerability instead of running from it, they begin to experience intimacy in its truest form. That shift doesn't happen overnight. Awareness is the first step. Once they understand that multiple shallow ties are a cage, not a shield, they can choose differently. Ultimately, maintaining multiple low-level connections is not proof of an empty heart. It's proof of a guarded one. And when that guard slowly comes down, the avoidant has the potential to build a relationship that is stronger and more meaningful than anything those scattered ties could ever provide. Consistency is avoided. Control is maintained through distance. For someone with avoidant tendencies, consistency feels dangerous, almost suffocating, to them. Showing up every day in the same way for one person isn't just about love, it's about exposure. Consistency requires vulnerability. It means being seen, being predictable, being depended upon. And dependence is the very thing that triggers their deepest fears. Instead of offering steady presence, they pull back, creating distance whenever things start to feel too stable or too close. That distance is their safety net, their way of saying, "I'm in charge of how much of me you get." This isn't because they lack love or don't value connection. It's because control, for them, equals survival. Somewhere along the way, they learned that consistency led to disappointment, rejection, or even pain. Maybe when they opened up as children, the response wasn't safe. Maybe when they relied on someone, that person disappeared or turned cold. So they trained themselves to associate consistency with danger. As adults, this belief stays locked inside of them, shaping how they show up in relationships. When their partner begins to expect regular closeness, they instinctively pull away. It's not personal, it's protective. Distance becomes their tool of control. By keeping space between themselves and others, they get to dictate the pace. They respond when they want, engage when it feels safe, and withdraw when the pressure builds. That inconsistency confuses their partners, who often misinterpret it as a lack of care. But to the avoidant, it's a carefully designed system to keep emotions manageable. Too much closeness feels like losing themselves. Too much consistency feels like giving away their freedom by breaking the rhythm, coming close then stepping back. They preserve a sense of independence while still holding onto a thread of connection. This push-pull dynamic can be frustrating for anyone trying to love an avoidant. One day they are affectionate and engaged. The next day they seem distant and unreachable. But from the avoidant's perspective, this is balance. It's their way of making sure they never lean so heavily on someone that they risk losing their identity or sense of control. It's not that they don't want love. They do. They just want love without the vulnerability that consistency demands. The irony is that true intimacy is built on consistency. Trust grows when someone shows up again and again, even in small ways. By avoiding it, avoidants cut themselves off from the very security they crave deep down. They want connection, but they're afraid to surrender the control that distance gives them. The cost of this pattern is that relationships remain shallow or unstable, because without consistent presence, the bond never deepens fully. The avoidant thinks they are keeping themselves safe, but in reality, they are keeping themselves stuck. The breakthrough comes when avoidants realize that control isn't the same as safety. True safety in relationships comes not from distance, but from trust. It comes from allowing someone to see you, to rely on you, and to prove over time that closeness doesn't equal danger. Consistency doesn't have to mean suffocation. It can mean stability, reliability, and freedom to relax. When avoidants learn to take small steps toward consistency, replying regularly, showing up predictably, being emotionally present even when it feels scary, they start to experience relationships in a new way. They discover that vulnerability doesn't strip them of control. It actually gives them deeper power, the power to love and be loved without fear. So when we say avoidants avoid consistency and maintain control through distance, it's not a flaw to shame. It's a wound to understand. And once understood, it can be healed. With patience, awareness, and courage, the pattern can shift. The moment an avoidant chooses to lean into consistency, they unlock the possibility of creating love that lasts, love that feels safe, and love that no longer needs the armor of distance to survive. Contact is often disguised as casual or accidental. This is one of the most subtle patterns avoidants rely on, and at first it can seem harmless. A quick message that looks random, a like on an old photo, a comment that appears offhand. These gestures rarely carry the weight of intentional connection on the surface, but beneath them lies a strategy, a way for avoidants to maintain bonds without exposing themselves to the full weight of intimacy. By disguising contact as casual, they avoid the vulnerability of openly admitting, "I miss you," or "I want to stay connected." It's a way of keeping the door open without ever stepping fully inside. The beauty of this strategy for the avoidant is that it gives them flexibility. If the other person responds positively, the avoidant can lean in a little more, enjoying the reassurance of connection without making a commitment. If the other person doesn't respond or responds negatively, the avoidant can retreat safely, blaming the contact on chance rather than revealing true intention. In this way, they protect themselves from rejection while still keeping relational ties alive. It's not about manipulation, it's about safety. They genuinely want to stay in touch, but doing so openly feels like too much risk. This pattern also reflects their deep fear of vulnerability. Open communication requires courage, the kind that says, "I care about you and I want you in my life." For the avoidant, that kind of directness feels like standing unprotected in the open. Casual or accidental contact provides a shield. It allows them to reach out without appearing needy, attached, or dependent. For example, they might send a meme, react to a story, or ask a trivial question that doesn't reveal deeper emotion. But hidden within these gestures is often the unspoken message, "I'm still here, I haven't let go of you completely." Partners of avoidance often find this confusing. They may wonder, if they don't want closeness, why do they keep reaching out? Why not just cut ties? The truth is that avoidants crave connection just like anyone else, but they want it on terms that minimize their sense of exposure. Casual contact is a perfect compromise. They can hold onto emotional threads without feeling cornered into deeper conversations about commitment or feelings. This allows them to preserve their independence while still having access to comfort, attention, or reassurance when they need it. The challenge is that over time, these disguised connections can prevent real growth. They keep relationships in limbo, never fully alive, never fully dead. For the avoidant, this feels safe, but for the other person, it often feels inconsistent, confusing, and emotionally draining. What seems like a harmless accidental message may reopen wounds, create hope, or stir unresolved feelings. While the avoidant experiences relief from keeping the bond alive, the other person may feel trapped in uncertainty. Growth for the avoidant begins when they start recognizing this pattern for what it is, an avoidance of vulnerability. To truly move forward, whether in letting go of old ties or building stronger ones, they must learn to communicate with intention, saying, "I miss you, I was thinking about you," or "I want to keep you in my life," requires courage, but it also creates clarity. It turns a shadow of connection into something real, something that can be nurtured or consciously released. Disguised contact might feel safe, but it also keeps the avoidant stuck in patterns of half-connection. The true breakthrough comes when they dare to move beyond casual gestures and step into authentic communication. By doing so, they not only honor their own needs, but also give others the gift of clarity. And clarity is what allows real love, trust, and growth to take root. When the avoidant replaces accidental with intentional, they transform shallow ties into meaningful relationships, or finally free themselves to build something new, whole, and unshakable. Their pattern isn't about betrayal, it's about safety and self-preservation. This is one of the most important truths to understand about avoidance, because from the outside, their behavior can easily be misinterpreted. When someone pulls away, keeps multiple casual connections, or hides behind distance, it's natural to assume they are untrustworthy or playing games. But in reality, avoidance actions are rarely rooted in the intention to hurt or betray. Instead, they are rooted in a deep-seated belief that closeness is dangerous and that survival depends on maintaining control, independence, and emotional safety. For the avoidant, safety has always been the highest priority. Many have histories that taught them love is inconsistent, that vulnerability leads to pain, or that depending on others results in disappointment. With this wiring, self-preservation becomes automatic. Instead of leaning into one person, they spread their energy across multiple small connections. Instead of expressing love directly, they hide behind casual gestures. Instead of embracing consistency, they distance themselves when things feel too close. To someone on the receiving end, it may look like betrayal. But from the avoidance perspective, it feels like survival. Their nervous system interprets intimacy not as safety, but as risk, so their patterns are attempts to minimize that perceived danger. When we frame avoidant behavior as betrayal, we miss the opportunity to see the humanity beneath it. Most avoidants are not malicious. They don't wake up thinking about how to deceive or hurt others. In fact, many of them feel guilty for their patterns, sensing the disappointment they cause but feeling powerless to change. They are torn between two opposing needs, the desire for connection and the need for safety. When safety wins, connection suffers, not because they don't care, but because their fear is louder than their love. This internal conflict is exhausting for them, even if it confuses or frustrates their partners. Understanding this distinction doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it creates compassion. Betrayal implies a conscious choice to break trust. Safety and self-preservation imply an unconscious drive to protect oneself. The avoidance behavior is not calculated manipulation. It's an ingrained reflex, and like any reflex, it can be unlearned with awareness, effort, and the right support. But the first step is recognizing the truth. What looks like rejection is often protection. What looks like betrayal is often fear. This shift in perspective also empowers partners and loved ones to respond differently. Instead of taking the avoidance distance as a personal insult, they can see it as a sign of inner conflict. Instead of labeling them as untrustworthy, they can recognize that the avoidant is operating from an old script that prioritizes survival. This doesn't mean tolerating patterns that hurt you, but it does mean understanding where those patterns come from. With that understanding, it becomes possible to set boundaries with clarity instead of resentment, to have honest conversations about needs, and to encourage the avoidant toward growth rather than reinforcing their fear. The avoidance path forward is learning that safety and connection are not opposites. They can exist together. True self-preservation doesn't mean pushing people away. It means creating relationships where vulnerability doesn't feel like a threat. This requires courage because stepping into deeper intimacy feels like standing in unfamiliar territory. But when the avoidant begins to test it, by opening up, by staying consistent, by risking direct communication, they start to discover that love doesn't have to hurt and closeness doesn't mean losing themselves. So when we say the avoidance pattern isn't about betrayal but about safety, we're really pointing to a deeper truth. Beneath the distance, beneath the inconsistency, beneath the casual gestures lies a heart that longs for love but fears being destroyed by it. That heart is not broken, it's just guarded. And when the guard begins to lower, when safety is redefined not as distance but as trust, the avoidant can finally experience what they've always wanted but never allowed themselves to fully feel, the freedom of being both safe and deeply connected at the same time. Awareness breaks the cycle. Growth comes from courage and conscious connection. For someone with avoidant tendencies, their behaviors often run on autopilot. They don't always realize why they pull back, why they keep multiple shallow ties, or why they disguise contact as casual. These patterns become so ingrained that they feel natural, almost like the only way to survive relationships. But the truth is, these habits are not destiny. They are learned strategies, and what is learned can also be unlearned. The turning point begins with awareness. When the avoidant starts to see their own cycle, when they recognize that their distancing isn't about freedom but about fear, everything begins to shift. Awareness is powerful because it shines light on what was once unconscious. Suddenly, the avoidant can connect the dots. I withdraw when I feel pressure because it reminds me of past hurt. Or I keep multiple connections because I'm scared of losing everything if I commit to one person. Instead of running these patterns blindly, they can pause, observe, and ask themselves if these actions truly serve the life they want to build. Awareness doesn't make the fear vanish, but it puts the avoidant back in the driver's seat. It gives them choice. Without awareness, the cycle repeats endlessly. With awareness, a door opens to change, but awareness alone is not enough. Growth requires courage, the courage to step into the very thing the avoidant has been running from: vulnerability. It takes courage to answer a message instead of ignoring it. It takes courage to say, "I miss you," instead of pretending the contact was accidental. It takes courage to remain consistent even when every instinct screams for distance. Courage is the bridge between awareness and transformation. Without it, the avoidant will understand their patterns but remain trapped by them. With it, they begin to rewrite their story. This courage is not about massive leaps all at once. It's about small, conscious steps. Choosing to be honest in a conversation, choosing to stay present when the urge to withdraw appears, choosing to invest in one relationship rather than scattering energy across many. Each choice builds new evidence that vulnerability does not always lead to destruction. Over time, the nervous system learns to relax, to see that connection can be safe. With each act of courage, the avoidant weakens the hold of fear and strengthens the capacity for love. Conscious connection is the final piece. Awareness identifies the cycle, courage breaks it, but conscious connection builds something new in its place. Conscious connection means showing up with intention, not accident. It means reaching out not because of fear, but because of desire. It means choosing to engage deeply with one person instead of hiding in casual ties. Conscious connection is deliberate. It is a commitment to honesty, presence, and consistency. For the avoidant, this feels foreign at first, almost unnatural. But as they practice, it becomes the foundation for true intimacy. What's remarkable is that when avoidants reach this stage, their relationships transform in ways they never imagined. Instead of constantly balancing fear and safety, they experience the freedom of being both safe and deeply connected. Instead of cycling through distance and closeness, they discover stability. Instead of hiding their feelings, they find the strength to express them openly. This is not just growth in relationships, it is growth as a person, because at its core, breaking the avoidant cycle is about reclaiming power from fear and choosing to live with openness instead of walls. So when we say awareness breaks the cycle and growth comes from courage and conscious connection, we are naming the path forward. The avoidant doesn't have to stay trapped in old strategies forever. By seeing clearly, by acting bravely, and by loving intentionally, they can transform relationships and create bonds that are not just safe, but deeply fulfilling. This is not an easy path, but it is the path to freedom. The freedom to love without fear and to be loved without conditions.